Hey guys, good evening. Todd Sachs of Sachs Realty, and welcome to this episode of Tuesday Night Live. Tonight we're talking about home renovations. If you're planning to sell, or you're investing in properties to flip, or you just want to make better decisions on home improvements that raise property values, keep watching, because in tonight's show, you're learning from one of the nation's best, most experienced residential real estate investors with more than $70 million in transactions across the country. He's on deck, and his name is Jay Scott. He's authored 4 books, co-hosts BiggerPockets Business Podcast with his wife, Carol, runs a popular website called flip123.com and goes by Jay. You'll also hear from our own agent, Ruth Lyons. She's a real estate investor. She's an author and contributor to Investor Junkie, as well as The Motley Fool. Her name's Ruth Lyons. I'm your host, Todd Sachs. As I had said, I'm the founder and broker of Sachs Realty here in Maryland with over 30 years of residential construction experience. Besides running Sachs Realty, I own residential and commercial investment properties, and I help buyers and sellers here in Maryland, as well as all over the country through my broker network. So here's how it works, guys. If you're watching us live, please chat with us on whatever platform you're watching, and we'll do our best to cover your questions tonight. If you're watching post-recording, if you send me an email at TS, that's for Todd Sachs, ts@sacsrealty.com, be sure to get back to you. As always, we appreciate you watching. And without further ado, let's meet Mr. Jay Scott. Jay, thank you so much for joining us here tonight.
Absolutely,
all the way from
Todd.
Florida.
I'm all the way from Florida. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. This is fun.
Absolutely. So did I miss anything?
No, you got it. You got it right. And I appreciate that great intro. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and bring Ruth in.
Hey guys.
There she is. How are you, Ruth?
I'm doing great. Nice to meet you both.
We're ready to teach some home renovation projects here tonight.
Absolutely. You know I love this stuff.
Absolutely. So, Jay, we'll go ahead. We'll get started with you, man. And I know you have like a top 10 golden rule. We're going to dive into some specifics, like kitchens and baths and stuff like that. But I know you have a top 10 golden rule when you're looking at properties and maximizing your investment profit. So take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a million rules when it comes to renovations, optimizing the value of your properties. But there are a few really important ones that when you're starting out or even when you're experienced, that it's really important to keep in mind, because these are the things that will ultimately make the difference between making a big profit, maybe making a little profit, maybe making no profit. So a few things. Let me throw out my top 10 favorites. So number one, keep in mind that there is no right or wrong amount of rehab. So I like to approach every renovation project with an open mind. I know a lot of people go in and say, okay, for every project, I'm going to replace all the cabinets, I'm going to replace all the flooring, I'm going to replace the roof and paint the exterior, whatever it is. But that's not the right way to approach a rehab. The right way to approach a rehab is, let's analyze each scenario and see for each scenario what level of profit it's going to generate for us. So for example, I'll go into a rehab property and I'll say, what if all I do is I clean it out, I paint the interior, I sweep the floors, I clean the carpets, and I put it back on the market. Obviously, I'm going to get a whole lot less of resale value out of doing that, but I've put in very little money. So that might generate a decent profit for me. Then I'll say, well, what if I do a little bit more than that? What if I replace the countertops and I paint the cabinets and I replace the lighting fixtures and the plumbing fixtures, and I paint the outside? How much would I be able to resell the property for there? And what would my numbers look like? What would my profit be? And then I say, well, what if I go the next step? I do a full cosmetic renovation. I replace the flooring, I replace the cabinets, I replace the countertops, I replace the lighting fixtures, the plumbing fixtures, I paint inside and out, and maybe I do some roof repairs. What does that get me? Then I say, well, what if I go in and do a major rehab? I upgrade the electrical, I replace the roof, I replace the HVAC, I replace the appliances, and I do all that. What does that get me? And then I say, well, what if I do something like adding a second level or changing the floor plan, moving walls around? And I analyze every separate scenario. Remember, you're not always going to get the same resale value on these scenarios. The less you do, the lower the resale value, but you're also spending less money. And there's going to be some optimal amount of rehab to maximize your price point. As a renovator, whether it's your personal residence or it's an investment property, your goal isn't necessarily to have the nicest looking house in the world. Sometimes it is. If that's going to generate you the most profit, then by all means have the nicest house in the world. But if it's going to generate more profit by having a house that's less nice or less upgraded, lower end finishes, then by all means do those. So that's number one. Now, along with that, I will say I just said there's no wrong way to do a rehab. There actually is. Over-rehabbing is wrong. That's the one thing in a rehab that's wrong. There are a lot of things that you're not going to get your money out by putting money in. And we'll talk about that throughout the rest of the episode. But do keep in mind that there are going to be things that you're just not going to want to do because you're putting in money that the buyer, you might love it, put in a man cave, or put in a big neon sign, or put in a 90-inch television. These are things you might love, but not all buyers are going to love them. These things are very taste specific, and you won't necessarily get your money out. So don't over rehab. Now, that leads me into tip number 3. What do you put your money in, and what types of finishes do you do? Neutral, 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 neutral. If there's one word you want to take away from this episode, it's the word neutral. Neutral paint colors, neutral finishes, neutral everything. Because at the end of the day, you want your renovation to appeal to as many potential buyers as possible. You don't want to shut buyers out, and you can't read buyers' minds. You don't know those taste-specific things they might like or dislike. So appeal to the largest buyer demographic possible, and do that by using neutral finishes, neutral colors. Okay? So that's tip number 3. Tip number 4, if you're going to replace a couple things in your renovation, keep in mind that your buyers are going to notice all those things that you don't replace. It's a slippery slope. You don't want to over improve. I already said that. But if you replace some of the light fixtures, your buyers are going to notice when you don't replace all your light fixtures. If you upgrade your cabinets but don't replace your countertops, your buyers are going to notice that. So always keep in mind that when you're upgrading something, keep in mind what other things are going to look bad because of it. If you replace your tile flooring that abuts your carpet's going to look worse because your carpet's old and the tile's new. If you replace your cabinets and your countertops, but you don't replace your appliances, your buyers are going to notice that. So always make sure that you're aware of the things that you're not replacing, because oftentimes that's just as important as the things you are replacing. And if by replacing some things, it makes other things look really bad, well, you're going to have to go the extra step and replace everything else as well. I always like to say, I don't replace one light fixture. I don't replace one plumbing fixture. If I'm going to replace a light fixture or a plumbing fixture, I'm going to replace all the light fixtures and all the plumbing fixtures. That takes me into my next tip, number 5. Make sure that there's continuity amongst your finishes. Don't use a contemporary fixture in one place and then you found a really cool Mickey Mouse fixture for the kids' bathroom. That might seem nice. Yeah, kids love Mickey Mouse. But what happens if that second bathroom ends up going to a father-in-law or a mother-in-law? Or what if that's a guest suite? They may not like the Mickey Mouse finishes. So make sure there's continuity amongst your finishes. Make sure you're not using brushed nickel in some of the rooms and copper finishes in other rooms and silver in other rooms and gold in other rooms. Make sure that somebody walks into the house and they feel like there's a flow and they feel like there's consistency. Otherwise, even if everything is brand new, your buyers are going to say, well, why doesn't the living room match the dining room, match the bedroom? And they're going to assume you either cut corners or you didn't replace everything, because there's really no reason for that. So make sure you have a consistent package of fixtures and that there's continuity. Leads me into tip 6. If you don't know how to pick fixtures, and many of us don't, I couldn't pick my own fixtures, make sure you hire a good designer. And a lot of times that could be a real estate agent, it could be a stager, it could be somebody that's recommended by your real estate agent. Hire somebody that can come in and say, I'm going to put together a package for you. I'm going to tell you what flooring to use. I'm going to tell you what color countertops to use. I'm going to tell you what style of light fixtures to use. I'm going to tell you what paint colors to use on the wall. And they'll put together a cohesive package that the buyer will walk in and say, wow, this all looks really nice and all works really, really well together. Don't be scared to go out and hire a designer. Number 7. This is a little weird, but follow me here. Make sure you know what the lighting situation is in your house. And when I say the lighting situation, I mean natural light. Natural light's really important when you're selling a house. And depending on which direction your house faces, depending on how many windows you have, depending on how large those windows are, depending on what trees you have outside, certain times of the day you may get more natural light. Other times of the day, you may get less natural light. You need to know what times of the day you get natural light, and do they coincide with the times of day that most likely your buyers are going to be seeing the property. One of the biggest reasons I see nice houses not sell is because buyers walk in and they're dark. Buyers walk in and say, I can't see myself living here. This just feels dark and dank, and it's just a psychological thing. So know when your buyers are going to walk through. It's probably going to be afternoons, maybe even evenings. Know where the light's going to be at that time. And if you're not getting enough natural light during those times that your buyers are most likely to walk through the house, make sure you take backup measures to have manufactured or not natural lighting fixtures that can brighten the house and make the house look nice. And I'll also say, a great agent will go to a house before showing and will turn on all the lights, because they want the buyers to walk in and they want that first impression to be, this is a house I want to live in, not the first impression be, okay, I have to go. When the buyers walk in or the agent walks in, they should be looking at the house. They shouldn't be looking for the light switches. So lighting is really important. It's important to know what your lighting situation is in your house. I mentioned staging earlier. I am a huge fan of staging. Staging can fix even the most major of potential issues in your house. If you have rooms that are too small, staging will make your house look bigger. If you have rooms that are too big and a buyer might say, wow, what am I going to do with this room? Staging will allow the buyer to envision what that room might look like. If you have an open floor plan, staging is going to define the rooms for you. If you have flaws, maybe you have a stain on the carpet somewhere. Obviously, you don't want to lie and hide it, but you can use the staging to minimize the reaction that the buyer might get. Staging is huge. It may not get you more money for your house, but in my experience, it will help you sell the house much, much faster. So staging, I'm a huge fan of staging every property that we do, even in a hot market. Next thing I'll say is, the best way to put this is, you only get one chance to make a first impression. Too often, we'll go out, we'll rehab a house, we'll spend 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 6 months maybe renovating a house. And we can no longer, after spending that much time at the house, we can no longer get our heads in the mindset of a buyer who's pulling up to that house for the very first time. So what I like to say is, if you're buying an investment property, and you're going to see an investment property for the first time, pay attention. Think about driving into the neighborhood. Think about driving through the neighborhood. What are you seeing in that neighborhood? Are there kids outside playing? Is there graffiti? Are there cars broken down and on the grass? Are there chickens running around? Is it nicely kept? Are the lawns well maintained or not well maintained? You're never going to notice these things again. And pay attention when you drive up to the house for the first time. Where does your eye get drawn? Does it get drawn to the weird roof line? Does it get drawn to the front door? Does it get drawn to the wall or the fence that's separating your house and the neighbor? Does it get drawn to like some big flag that somebody's flying? Again, you're never going to get that first impression back. You're going to be so used to seeing it that you're not going to know what the buyer is going to really be thinking about the first time. So every time I go to a house for the very first time, I try and be really present. I try being really cognizant about what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling and what I'm seeing, so that I can expect or predict what the buyer is likely to be seeing and feeling and thinking the very first time they pull up. Likewise, the first time they walk into that house, where's their eye going to be drawn? Is it going to be drawn far into the living room? Is it going to be drawn down onto the tile floors in front of them? Is it going to be a narrow hallway and their attention is drawn left or right? You only get one chance at that first impression. So use it. Pay attention when you pull up to the house. And I also like to say, before you list a house, have somebody that you know and trust, and somebody that hasn't seen the house. So whether it's a realtor that's never seen the house, whether it's a designer that's never seen the house, or maybe it's just a couple of your friends, and say, this is what I want you to do. I'm going to give you the address. I'm going to give you the lockbox code. I want you to drive to that house, and I want you on your phone making voice notes of everything you're seeing and thinking and feeling. And that will give you an idea, because they're going to say things like, I pulled up to the house and the first thing I noticed was the door was a weird color. It felt like the door didn't belong. And there was a big tree branch over in the side yard. And the aluminum window on the front window wasn't painted and it just looked old and rusty. Those are the things that you won't notice after a couple of weeks on the job, but a buyer will notice the first time they pull up. So know what a buyer is likely to be thinking the very first time they pull up to the house. And then number 10, always be conservative in your estimates. This is the biggest reason I believe I've been successful in this business. And I think it's the biggest reason that successful people in this business tend to be successful, is because they're always conservative. They're conservative in their rehab estimates, their budget. They're conservative in their rehab schedule. They're conservative in how much they're going to sell a house for. They're conservative in how long it's going to take to sell the house. They're conservative in what they're going to pay for commissions and concessions and buyer concessions. They're conservative about every aspect of the deal. So that way, when everything goes wrong, and if I talk about my first deal, I'll be talking about a deal where literally everything went wrong. I made $1,200 on my first deal. It took me 2.5 years. It took me 2 rehabs. I was over budget by a ridiculous amount. I sold it for a lot less than I expected to, but I made $1,200 because I was conservative in every aspect of my underwriting and pro forma. So always be conservative, because at the end of the day, that's the thing that's going to save you when you make mistakes, and you will make mistakes. I've done over 400 flips. I make mistakes every time. So those are kind of my top 10 things that I like to keep in mind. And I'll repeat them real quick for anybody that's out there. Number 1, analyze all the scenarios. 2, don't over rehab. 3, neutral. Number 4, if you replace a couple things, keep in mind that the things that you didn't replace are going to stand out. Number 5, make sure you have continuity amongst your finishes. Number 6, bring in a designer if you need it. Number 7, know your lighting situation. Number 8, make sure you use staging, or at least highly consider using staging. Number 9, you only get one chance to make that first impression. And number 10, really, really be conservative.
Yeah, they're great. That's a great top 10 list. It's funny. You talk about, that first impression when you pull up to a house. We hear it all the time. I mean, we're trying to convince, or not convince, but explain to sellers, what buyers are experiencing, or what they're about to experience pulling up or walking through. And it's very difficult sometimes because they don't want to hear it. They've lived in the house, they've raised their kids in the house, or whatever the case is, and they think it's perfect. Yeah. And, Ruth, what do you have what are your comments on that?
Well, the one comment that he made, one of his top 10 that really stuck with me, is the whole, if you replace one thing, the other things are going to look dated, which I learned the hard way, and ended up spending more than I wanted to, because I didn't want to leave it that way. But that's a really good point. Don't over improve. I see rehabbers do it all the time, just spending too much money. The key is to know who your buyer is. As an agent, I go to similar to the comps on the market before I advise my seller on what they should do, so that I know what that buyer is looking for in that neighborhood. I mean, real estate is very local. So we're going to go over a lot of things tonight, but you have to keep in mind that and what I love about this business is each house is different, each situation is different, the neighborhood's all different. I mean, you're making decisions on the fly a lot of times, but you can still make informed decisions.
Absolutely. My wife, we play this fun game every time we buy a house, where my wife, who is the most amazing marketing, sales, designer, I mean, she's the reason we've been successful. We play a game where she will predict who our buyer is going to be. So how big the family is going to be? Are they going to have a pet? Where are they moving from? How far are they moving? What type of job do they have? What's their income bracket look like? Obviously, she's not going to be right every time. But if you can at least get some idea in your head of what that buyer demographic looks like, that gives you the ability, while still being neutral, you don't want to be too taste specific, but it can still allow you to make decisions. And we'll talk about some of these decisions throughout the show, that are more likely to appeal to that demographic of buyer, won't necessarily detract from other demographics, but might appeal and help sell if that is the demographic of buyer that ends up buying the house.
That's a great game. So I think that you should look to patent that and, box it up, and it should be, a great gift for everybody that is looking to sell a house or invest in one. Here's a book right here. One of Jay's books I'm in the middle of reading, Estimating Rehab Cost. And guys, I know you may be watching from all over the country and maybe out of the country. And what we're going to dive into right now is, we're going to talk about 7 main areas that as real estate professionals, we're navigating sellers or investors through these 7 big, items. And we're going to start with number 1 is the kitchen. So, Jay, you see it all the time. I mean, people overspend. And the big thing that I hear a lot is, well, I want, my house is worth this much money despite what the comps say, because we just did this or we just did that, or we spent X amount of dollars. And guys, I'm here to tell you, and Jay's about to affirm this, it doesn't matter what you spend. We're looking on, you should be familiar with what the comps are in the neighborhood. Like Jay said, you don't want to be the best house necessarily in a neighborhood. The other homes bring your value down. You want the other homes in the neighborhood to bring you up. So if you're living in a house that you're thinking about selling, or, in the next 5-7 years, and you need to do improvements, or if you're investing, you should know what those other houses are like. So you can go online, you can check them out, see what the ones in your neighborhood are selling, what they look like now. But, Jay, let's talk about kitchens, because I know you've rehabbed a lot of them. Yep. What are the big things? No matter where you are, what do people want and trends right now with kitchens?
Well, let me start with even more important than trends. One of the things people want, and certainly the higher end the property that you get into, the more detail that you need to be considering. So this is a very general statement, but kitchens are obviously very important, and to a lot of people would say that they're by far the most important room in the house when selling a property. The most important thing, as far as I'm concerned, is new. Somebody would rather have a brand new low-end set of cabinets than an old beaten up set of high-end cabinets. Somebody would rather have a new low-end set of appliances than an old beat-up set of nicer appliances. We get this feedback all the time. We've seen it over and over and over. And I know people disagree with that, but hundreds of rehabs have told us that people want new first. So when I go into a kitchen, the first thing I look at is if the cabinets aren't in pristine condition, I will replace the cabinets. Countertops. These days, stone countertops, whether it be granite, whether it be quartz, whether it be even concrete, is better than a laminate countertop. It used to be that in some lower end homes, you could get away with laminate. I don't see laminate anywhere because the price of laminate has gone up. The price of granite has come down, or stone has come down. And with that gap closing, you just don't see a lot of laminate countertops anymore. Now, Todd, you said it perfectly before. You need to know, and whether this is you walking houses or your designer walking houses or your agent walking houses, you need to know what the comps are. You need to know what the other houses in the neighborhood selling at that price point have. If they have stainless steel appliances, you don't want white appliances unless you factor that into your resale value. Unless you say, I'm going to put in lower end appliances and I expect to sell it for less and that will increase my profit. That's absolutely fine. But if you walk into a house and you say, I can sell, or I want to sell my property for the same price as this property, if they have new cabinets, you probably need new cabinets. If they have hardwood flooring, you don't want carpet. If they have new light fixtures, you probably don't want the old light fixtures. So especially with kitchens, I'm a big fan of new. I'm a big fan of contemporary, and always I'm a big fan of neutral. But make sure you know what your competitors or what your comps are selling with. And I like to say you always want to be exactly in line with your comps or a half step above them. If you're a full step above them, you're wasting money. Half step above them, you're going to stand out.
Jay, what about cooking? Do you recommend gas? A lot of places don't have natural gas; they have electric. Do you recommend upgrading, or I don't even know if you'd say upgrading, but do you find where gas is more desirable?
Yeah, so certainly gas is desirable. If you have that choice, if you're renovating a house that has gas and you have the choice of putting in a gas stove or electric stove, that is one of those things that a lot of people notice. I'm a big fan of induction ovens, and I would never buy a house now that didn't have an induction oven, but nobody knows what they are, and nobody's going to walk into a house and look to see if there's an induction oven. So even though that's an upgrade and that's something that people would like if they knew about it, nobody knows about it. Gas, on the other hand, people actively walk into a kitchen and say, is it gas or is it electric? Because if somebody's cooking, if somebody's a cook, they're most likely very much going to prefer gas over electric. So certainly if you have that option, and I'm not saying you should spend $10,000 to get gas lines run to your house or install a huge propane tank in the ground or anything like that. But if the house offers gas and it's just not run to the kitchen appliances, it's worth the few $100s to run gas to the kitchen stove and have a gas stove. Islands are fantastic. Obviously, you want to have the space, but a lot of houses these days have islands. Remember, we live in very much an HGTV culture. People see what other people are buying on TV, and they assume that's what I should have as well. Very rarely do you see a decent-sized house these days on HGTV that doesn't have an island. So even if people don't know why they want it or have never had an island, people look and say, that's an upgrade. That's something that's really nice. That's what nice houses have. And so having an island, even if it's just one 36-inch cabinet and a cheap piece of granite that you can put in for $1,000 or $1,500, that's going to be a big upgrade because a lot of people are going to look at that and say, that's something that I don't see in every house. As long as we're talking about kitchens, let's talk about open floor plans, because this is typically a concept or an idea that involves the kitchen. If you have an open concept floor plan, generally the kitchen's more open. If you don't have an open concept floor plan, your kitchen's not. And I get a lot of questions these days. Should I be going open concept? Should I be opening up walls? Should I be opening things up? It's funny because for the past 10 years, we've kind of been getting more and more towards the yes, absolutely, you should. Certainly in a tiny house, you don't want to open it up so that there's no privacy. But if you have a decent sized house that you still have privacy in individual rooms, or you have a separate living room, opening up a main living room to a kitchen has traditionally been a great idea. Opening up the house more and more and more has been gaining popularity. I am going to throw out one little not disclaimer, but one little thing to think about. Things have changed in the last 6 months. With COVID, people are now starting to think about how many rooms their house has. Because if you have 2 adults that are working from home and 2 kids that are working from home, like I do, like my house is, we each need a room. We each need a room that we can be on a Zoom call, or we can be on a conference call, or we can be on a meeting, or be doing whatever we're doing. And if you open up a house too much, if not everybody has their own room, that makes COVID times very difficult. I'm not saying that this is a trend that's going to last more than another year or two. If COVID goes away, people may not be thinking about this anymore, and open floor plan could be popular again. But I have seen a lot of people, and honestly, I just moved out of a house into a new house specifically because we needed one more room. 2 adults and 2 kids, we needed 4 full rooms that we could use as offices. And so these days, I would say if you're planning to flip a house and it's during COVID times, I would err on the side of less opening up floor plans these days than I might have said 6 or 8 months ago, and that I might say a year or 2 from now. So that's definitely something to keep in mind with open floor plans, that may be changing a little bit. What else? I will say a lot of people ask me, can I just paint my cabinets? And the answer is maybe. The answer is maybe. Here's the thing with painting cabinets. If you cheap out and you hire a regular painter to paint your cabinets, you are going to be throwing away money. Those cabinets are going to look horrible. If you find somebody that specializes in painting cabinets, knows how to do it, knows how to sand them properly and paint them properly, you can get a cabinet that you would never know is painted, but you're going to spend a decent amount of money. You're going to spend $1,500, $2,000 to paint a decent sized set of cabinets. Now, that still may be cheaper than the $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 you're going to put in, but don't spend $200 or $300 painting your cabinets. Find somebody that specializes in painting cabinets, see work that they've done in the past, and be prepared to spend $1,000 or $2,000 to do it right. One of the bigger mistakes I definitely see with new rehabbers is they try and cheap out by painting kitchen cabinets, and at the end, they would have been better off just leaving the old cabinets unpainted. Mm-hmm. So I will definitely point that out. So
those too. Yeah, I was going to comment too that with the open floor plan, sometimes what people don't realize is you open it up too much and you can hear everything throughout the house, and you can almost hear an echo. And people don't like that. They're not going to like. I've just noticed that can be a problem.
Yep. And it's another first impression thing. You have to think about, if I open up the house, what's it going to look like when they walk in the front door? If it looks too open and it looks like the house is essentially one big room, unless your stage is really good, your house is going to look a whole lot smaller than it would otherwise with rooms. So if you open up a house, I typically say, make sure that there's some foyer or a hallway or entryway that is not open to the rest of the house, because you don't want that very first impression to be just one huge house, one open house. Last thing I'll say is about appliances. I have a lot of people who ask me, can I do scratch and dent appliances versus new appliances? In a rental, absolutely. In a new house, I'm a big fan of not using scratch and dent, at least not anything that's visibly dented or scratched or damaged, because this goes back to if you replace one thing, you should replace everything. If a buyer sees that refrigerator is damaged or a dishwasher is dented, the first thing they're going to be thinking is, what else did they skimp out on? What else did they not go all out? Yeah. And so the few $100 extra to get brand new appliances, and stainless steel, not white, not black. Again, if that's part of your plan to do white or black, but if you're just trying to save money, that's not the place to save money.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you from a flipping standpoint. I mean, I've put the scratch and dents in before, even though they're perfectly great appliances and brand new. It definitely gives the wrong impression of like, what else did they go cheap on? Yep. And they're not that much cheaper. So guys, even you homeowners, don't buy the scratch and dents. Anyway, so let's move right along. We'll talk about bathrooms. So I hear a lot, especially older homes. Jay, what's your opinion? I mean, should they add bathrooms? Should they up?
And so, for example, in Atlanta these days, where we're still flipping, we literally cannot sell a house with one bathroom. I mean, I could price it $50,000 below the next lowest price house, and I'm still not going to sell it with one bathroom. People just don't want one bathroom houses. I'm also doing some smaller stuff in Florida, and people are absolutely fine, because a lot of times in Florida, it's a couple, they don't have kids, or it's a couple with an older person, and one bathroom might be sufficient. Know what's going on in your neighborhood, know what's going on in your location, know the percentages of houses that are selling with one bath versus two bath versus 1.5 bath. Typically speaking, up to 4 bedrooms, you don't need more than 2 baths. But I will point out that it's one of the reasons it's important to have an idea of who your buyer is likely to be, that buyer demographic, is for bathtubs. So a lot of us, if we don't have kids, and I know when I didn't have kids, I never thought about a bathtub. I didn't use a bathtub. My wife didn't use a bathtub. Why do you need a bathtub? The 3 days after my first son was born, I understood the value of a bathtub. So anybody with a child, especially a young child, or anybody that has a child that's going to be having another or more children in the near future, are going to value the bathtubs. So if there's any shot that your buyer is going to have young kids, and even, I'm not going to say adults don't like bathtubs. Adults like bathtubs too, but definitely, if your buyer's going to have young kids, make sure you have at least one bathroom with a bathtub. And if you're sure your buyer is going to have kids, if it's maybe a really good school district, it's a neighborhood where there are a lot of kids, then maybe ensure that every full bathroom has a bathtub as opposed to just a stand-up shower. Because this is one of the things that doesn't seem like a big deal, but is one of those things that buyers will say, I can't live in this house because I have kids, I need a bathtub. So
how about dealing with outdated tile? I know it can be expensive. I mean, some floors are poured with the tile, and I mean, it's you're jackhammering or hammer drilling. How do you deal or recommend someone deal with outdated tile?
So typically what I've found is there are companies now that will do this acrylic spray over the tile that makes it nice and shiny and can change the color and make it look really nice. We've had good success with that in showers, especially in showers where the tile's in pretty good shape, but there might be a tile missing or a couple tiles missing. They can replace the tiles with something that has the same look and feel, spray the whole thing so it's a consistent color and a consistent finish. And assuming the tub or the shower base is in good shape, that's worked very well for us, and we've done that in a number of flips. I'm not a fan of using that on floor tile. Typically speaking, if I have a bathroom with outdated floor tile, I will rip it up and I'll either put in new floor tile or I'll put in some other type of flooring. So I do like that technology, especially if you have a company that does it well. I do like that for tubs and showers. Not a fan of it for floor tile.
So give us some why not? Why don't you like it for floors?
Because I've seen how it comes out. It tends to come out very shiny. And the floors don't look like natural tile floors. They tend to stand out. You walk into the bathroom and your eye is just drawn down to this shiny floor that looks like it has an epoxy coating over top of it. And it doesn't do it for me. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing to do. If you've seen it and you like it and you think it won't be a problem in your house, absolutely go for it. Just a personal opinion. The one time that I've seen that, or actually my partner tried it on the floors, it just didn't look good.
Yeah. And I guess I agree with that. I mean, Ruth, we've done this, right? I mean, my last flip, I sprayed the floor tile, and have you done that before, Ruth?
I've done the showers and the tubs. I have not done the floor tile, but I can picture what Jay's objecting to. It is a shinier color, so it doesn't look natural.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I mean, it was something, I think you have to weigh back and forth, how much you want to invest or what you will get out on the upside. But, like I said, it beat hammer drilling, and I didn't have to demo the rest of the bathroom. So the tub turned out great. And we did it actually as an afterthought. What about...
keep in mind that there are other things you can do there. I mean, you can go over tile with other tile. You can go over tile now. There's vinyl plank flooring that we'll be talking about in a bit, but there's what they call luxury vinyl plank or luxury vinyl tile, which is a vinyl product, but a really nice product that will go right over tile with just a nice little underlayment. So if you're in a house that it's just a pain in the butt to jackhammer up those tile floors, then absolutely there are some alternatives. And I'll also point out, just from a renovation standpoint, it's always interesting because you never know how difficult tile is going to be to get up. Depending on who installed the tile, you may find that it's really simple. Like you take one up and they all start popping up.
Right.
And then I just moved into a house recently where we took up the tile, and literally it was 40 hours to get up about 1,500 square feet of tile. It was ridiculous. So a lot of times it basically, I would suggest go find a tile somewhere in the corner and try and get it up, see what happens. If it comes up easily, the rest of the floor probably will. If it doesn't, then maybe just put it back and go over it.
Jay, my personal residence that we bought, it was actually built by a tile guy. So, I mean, there was tile everywhere. And when I say that when we were renovating the bathrooms, we were literally hammer drilling. It was set in concrete, and the floors were like 6 inches thick. So yeah, it was crazy. All right, let's talk lighting. You touched on lighting before, and you mentioned, if you're going to replace one light fixture, don't just stop there. I've seen it where there were two of the same kind of lights in the same room and they replaced one but didn't replace the other, you instantly looked at the one and said, wow, that looks like it was from the 1970s. So let's talk, how important is recessed lighting?
So important, I don't think recessed lighting for me, I like it. I have it in my personal residence. But for me, recessed lighting is more a solution to a problem. Recessed lighting is great when it's not practical to have other types of lights. So for example, if you are in a kitchen and with 8-foot ceilings, it's not going to make sense to have fans over an island because basically the fan's going to be too low to the island, or to have what's affectionately referred to as the nipple fixtures. They may hang down too low in a kitchen setting. Not necessarily bad for a bedroom, but in a living room or a kitchen, it may not be a good look. And that's where recessed lighting is great, because for lower ceilings, you get to retain that space and you still get the feel of the taller ceilings. So for me, I'm a fan of recessed lighting. I will use recessed lighting, but I'm not going to go out of my way to spend money on, and recessed lighting, the lights are cheap. I mean, you can get nice recessed lights for $25. It's the running the new electrical and then repairing the sheetrock and painting and all those things that if you have to do it anyway, if those ceilings are opened up, if you're running new electrical circuits anyway, then yeah, absolutely go for it. But if you're not, I don't think recessed lighting is absolutely necessary, except again, if you're trying to solve the problem of low ceilings and lights that come down too far.
And I would add to that higher end homes, I've walked with many buyers in higher end homes, and the recessed lighting is expected.
Yeah. Let me point out, everything we're talking about here is kind of median price point for a neighborhood. Typically, especially in uncertain economic times, good house flipping involves buying houses that are going to resell at the median price point. Things at well above the median price point, that's the part of the market that tends to slow down first. Likewise, well below the median price point. So everything I'm talking about here is pretty much the median price point. The rules completely change when you get to high-end or luxury houses, both in terms of level of finishes, taste-specific finishes, and the type of work you do. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And certainly, and again, this is where knowing your comps as well. If every other house in the neighborhood has recessed lighting, you absolutely need recessed lighting.
And I think from a cost standpoint too, I mean, if you have a house with plaster, the old horsehair plaster, and that has the slats, and I mean, you're really talking about a major deal where if, your house was built really in the mid to late 70s, 80s, it may be very easy to pop out some holes and put some old work cans, which doesn't require a whole lot of demo. No, that's great. Well, I mean, we're touching on this, so we'll just move right in. Trim, finishing, finishes, and paint. And I guess the biggest question, because I see a lot, and I guess it's different where you live. In Florida, you may have it more than what we have it here in the Maryland area. Popcorn ceilings.
So
Ruth kind of cringed on that.
Yeah.
I will very often remove popcorn ceilings. If you have a decent painter and you're painting the ceilings anyway, it really isn't that difficult to remove the popcorn ceilings. It's basically spraying water on there, taking a scraper and scraping, and popcorn generally comes off very easily. That to me is worth the extra cost. That to me is worth the extra time. And again, it's mostly labor. It's not materials cost. That is definitely worth it, because that's one of the things that you walk in and will certainly date a house. Now, that said, texture in general is going to depend on a number of things. I am not a fan. If you have a house where you've replaced a lot of sheetrock, don't use texture. If the sheetrock is in good shape and otherwise doesn't need texture, don't add texture just as an accoutrement to the house. But if you walk into a house that's older and the sheetrock is older and has imperfections and dents and dings, or maybe already has texture on it, some texture is a great way to avoid having to re-plaster or re-sheetrock an entire house. So it's one of those things that bring in somebody that has a good eye for those sorts of things and say, hey, is it worth me spending $5,000 to kind of re-sheetrock this whole this whole area, or can I get away with it and let somebody else tell you how bad it is and whether you can get away with it or not?
Yeah. One of the things that I've done pretty much on every house that I've renovated is, I'll run. So we'll talk like a dining room. We talk about painting and finishing and trim. I will actually put a chair rail and then I'll spray a semi-gloss, like a white semi-gloss from the chair rail down to the floor, to the baseboard. And it really looks good. It's a very inexpensive way to really dress it up, where some spend a lot of money on wainscoting and a lot of, boxing and things like that. What are your opinions on doing that?
I'm a big fan of using paint in lots of situations to make a house look more impressive. So that's a great example of how paint can be used. Like you said, just a chair rail at like 4 feet and then white paint below, and it looks like a wainscoting. I've seen a number of and we've done it in our personal residence, where we take 2 pieces of trim up in the crown molding, and we will two pieces of ornate trim. We'll separate them by about 4 or 6 inches, and then we'll paint the trim white and the area between it white, and it just looks like a 6 or 8 inch piece of trim. It looks very ornate, and it's really just 2 cheap pieces of trim that have paint between them.
Very inexpensive.
Very inexpensive. Now, I will say this, and again, this doesn't apply to higher end houses. This doesn't apply to higher end houses with higher end finishes, but trim is a great place to save money in a renovation. Most of the time, buyers are going to walk in and they're going to look at the house and they're not going to notice if there's crown molding. I don't know. I'm in my house that I've been in now for about 3 weeks. I'm not looking up right now. I have no idea if there's crown molding around my ceilings or not. Okay, I looked up. There is not crown molding. There's not crown molding in this room. I know it's in the other rooms. I didn't know if it was in this room. People don't tend to notice that before they buy a house. They will when they get in. One day they'll be walking around and they'll say, "Huh, interesting. There are gaps in the quarter round," or there's no crown molding there. But they don't tend to notice that the first time. And it's certainly, again, if it's not a high end or a luxury house, a lot of times that's not going to be a deal breaker. So for me, this is one of those places where I think skimping and saving a little money isn't necessarily going to hurt you, especially if you're over budget on other things and you're looking for something that you're not going to kill yourself by skimping on.
Yeah, I found that crown molding actually can work against you because it can show a lot of the imperfections of the wall. So, I mean, you're going to fix it with caulk, and then that's not a long-term fix, and that's that's going to come back on you later, and they're going to say, "Look at this craftsmanship that they did," or whatever.
Absolutely.
So especially if you're a rehabber, it's a good way of getting some bad reviews. What about painting the ceilings white? So I have some people that still insist on the same color ceiling and walls.
I'm a 3-color paint scheme fan. Your walls, your ceiling, and your doors, different colors. And I am a big fan of ceiling white for ceilings. You want the bright, and remember, light. We like light. And white ceilings will reflect light and make a room feel bigger and brighter. Any other color ceiling will not do that. I'm a big fan of neutrals on the wall. So pick a nice, these days, grays are the big one. So if you're looking for a paint color, amazing gray. You'll never go wrong with amazing gray these days. And then doors, I'm a big fan of doing doors a darker color as like a nice little accent. But no, I'm not a fan of doors, walls, ceilings, or any of the 3 the same color.
Ruth, what do you like? Oh, go ahead, Jay. I'm sorry.
I like the doors and the trim in the semi-gloss white, maybe gloss white, and then the definitely ceiling white. You don't want to paint the ceiling the same color as the rooms.
Yeah.
Yep.
What were you saying, Jay?
I was just going to say another great way to add something that's a nice little pop, not too taste specific, still relatively neutral, but can help the house stand out, is just an accent wall. So pick a wall at the end of a long room, or pick a wall that's kind of off by itself and paint it a different color. Pick a nice, not out of the ordinary color, not bright red, not black, but pick something that is a little bit brighter, that contrasts and accents the main wall color well, and it just stands out. And then if you have good staging, you can put a nice table around it. You can hang the right picture on it, and it just makes the house feel unique. It makes it feel different than all the other houses, which is a good thing to an extent. You want the house to stand out. You don't want it to stand out in a bad way, but you want it to stand out.
Yeah. Let's talk about flooring. So you've touched on it a little bit as far as transitioning and, if you're going to replace one and you have to replace the other. And so what do you do in your rehabs?
So in our rehabs, this is, again, it's going to be very area specific. And so we've started rehabbing in Florida in the last year, and Florida is kind of different than the rest of the world. Basically everything's tile. People have tile in their bedrooms and their bathrooms and their kitchen, and it drives me nuts because I'm from Maryland, and I like hardwood. I like carpet. So know your neighborhood, know what's popular in your neighborhood. I will say that I'm still a huge fan of carpet in the bedrooms. I know people deviate from that, and if you have a good reason to deviate from that, but I don't think you'll ever go wrong with a nice carpet in bedrooms. For common areas, I will say that I'm no longer a fan of laminate wood. I know for many years laminate was a popular thing. It's a relatively cheap option. These days, if you're not in Florida where it's going to be tile, if you're not in Florida, I'm a big fan of either hardwood, real hardwood, which I'll be honest is expensive, especially these days. You can pay up to $8, $9 a square foot for real hardwood, oak installed, finished, and so that may not be the best choice except for higher end houses. But these days, again, I had mentioned the luxury vinyl tile or the luxury vinyl plank. Generally, you're looking at somewhere between $1.50 and $3 a square foot for nice stuff. Installation cost anywhere from $1 to $2 a square foot. So for $4 or $5 a square foot, you're getting something that is a very nice product. It tends to be water resistant. It tends to stand up well to wear and tear. You can get it in all different. I feel like I'm an infomercial here. You can get it in different colors and styles, and so I'm a very big fan of luxury vinyl tile these days in basically all common areas.
Neutral colors as well? Or
yeah. My wife's a big fan of saying nobody should ever notice the floors. So your floors should not necessarily be the same colors as the walls. You want contrast, but also neutral. You don't want a bright orange carpet. You don't want a luxury vinyl tile or a vinyl flooring with lots of swirls and designs on it. You want flooring that just is there and nobody really notices it, because flooring isn't going to, generally, it's not going to sell your house. It's only going to detract if it's bad.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, Ruth, what do you use most of the time?
I use the vinyl too, and I always make sure that I get the one that has a padding underneath. That way, it's less labor because they don't have to lay two layers. Yeah.
Yep.
So, and it makes a difference. Mm-hmm.
It does.
All right, let's talk basements. And I get this a lot. I mean, a lot of places, basements aren't common, and if you're in flood zone areas, I know. Unless your house is built up, you're not dealing with it. But here on the East Coast, I mean, we have a lot of basements.
Yep.
And we hear all the time, I spent all this money on my basement and my house should be worth this much more. And guys, I'm telling you, it doesn't work that way. So, Jay, what do you recommend? I mean, for people with basements?
You want your basements to be nice, light, bright, and clean. That's what you care about. You want walls, sheetrock, paint, flooring, lighting fixtures, and outlets. So you don't need anything fancy. You don't need to define the space as a man cave or a bar or whatever it is. In fact, it's better not to define the space. Don't spend money on that. Spend money on getting it nice, bright, clean, and a place. And dry. Absolutely. And make it a place that you want your buyers to walk in, because you're not going to design the basement exactly the way the buyers want. You want them to walk in and say, I can work with this. I can do this, and we can put this here, and we can put this there. And it's going to be different for every buyer, but you're giving them a starting point where they say, I don't see spiders. There's no water. There's no exposed 2x4s. Everything is nice and bright and clean and ready for the new buyers to do something else with.
Yeah, I've been involved in a lot of older, flips, and what happens a lot of times is the basement's a dungeon. And there's only so much you can do. I mean, if you have an old house and it's, 6-foot ceilings or 7-foot ceilings, and it doesn't really make sense to drywall, what we make sure, Jay, just like you said, we clean everything, get the cobwebs out, and then we actually spray, semi-gloss paint over all the rafters. And that really just makes a big difference in brightening it up, because a lot of times in these older places, that's where the laundry areas are going to be. So, you're going down in the basement to do that several times a week, and you don't want to be, your buyer to be afraid to do that. It's a big turnoff.
Let me point out one more thing with respect to basements, and this goes back to our discussion about lighting. Light in basements is really important, and I'm going to say this, and now everybody's going to notice it when they do it. You walk into a Costco or a Best Buy, and that you see the racks of TVs out on the thing, and you're going to notice that there's a special mode on every brand new TV these days, and it's called display mode, where the stores can literally put it in this mode so it looks different than it does at your home. And basically that mode is it sets the background brightness as high as it can possibly be set. It's not the way you want to watch your TV, but it makes it look really good in the store. You need to do the same thing with your house. I don't want to walk into a house with a 5,000 kilowatt bright white light bulb in every fixture, but that's how we renovate all our houses and stage all our houses, because you walk in, it's a harsh white light if you're living in the house and you're experiencing it for hours on end. But if you're just walking into a house for a few minutes, it's going to make the house look a lot brighter and a lot warmer. So 5,000 kilowatt bright white lights, just especially in basements. And then the other thing, if you have light fixtures, and this is a tip from my wife, don't buy a fan light that has one light fixture and that big like globe underneath. Buy the one that has the most light fixtures. Buy the one that has four bulbs. Get the most light out of every fixture you put in your house.
Great point.
Good point.
Ruth, talk about dryness, because a lot of times, sellers will temporarily or say, oh, we just need to run the dehumidifier, or we need to, we may have a water issue at certain points. I mean, you recommend always fixing those water issues.
Absolutely. The water issues are a big problem. And we do have basements in this area. I know in Florida, you don't much anymore, but, never have, but the water and the musty smell that goes with the water, you got to get rid of that. There's damp rid that you can put down there, but address the problem, not just cover up the issue.
Yeah, because it will come out, whether, it comes out during your attempt to sell or, through the inspection or later, it will come out, which kind of leads us into the next point. And our final point here is landscaping, because a lot of times the water that's coming in the basement is because the grading or, things outside. Jay, in one of your podcasts that I was watching, you had said that the very first thing that you do when you're assessing a property, whether you're going to buy it or not, is you look outside. Then you're looking top down, but really the first thing you're doing is looking outside. And I know, and what I tell people all the time, and what I use as a rule of thumb too, is there's certain things outside that you can't change. It may be that neighbor, that messy neighbor, or the landscape, that's in other people's yards or across the street, but you can certainly control what is on your yard. So give us some big tips on landscaping.
Yeah. So my biggest tip for landscaping is you want landscaping that absolutely nobody notices. Because if your buyers notice your landscaping, it's for one of two reasons. They either notice it because it's bad, and that's going to hurt you. That's going to hurt your ability to sell the house, or they're going to notice it because it's really, really good, which is a good thing, but you are not getting that money back. That's a waste of landscaping that looks awesome that buyers notice is money that's thrown away, because buyers are going to love it, but no buyer is going to say, I'm buying the house because of that landscaping. It's not going to change their decision. They're not even going to pay more for it in our experience. But it's one of those things that you can spend a whole lot of money on. So I'm a big fan of, with landscaping, make it good enough that nobody even notices it's there, but no better. Don't over improve. I see a lot of people that over improve landscaping, and we've made the mistake of over improving landscaping before as well. No,
I was just going to say, it can, the big landscaping can work against you, because, people say, oh my gosh, how much is it going to cost to maintain this thing? And I got to weed these beds. And then the first thing they ask is, do you have a neighborhood landscaper, and how much do you pay?
Exactly. Exactly. And then Ruth brought up the biggest thing is water as a renovator, as a homeowner, water is our biggest enemy. Water does more damage to houses than anything else. And so make sure that you're doing things like don't let your trees overhang your roof, because that's going to damage your roof and that's going to let water in. Make sure that your yards are properly graded and that water is flowing away from the house. Make sure you have downspouts that are far enough away from the house. Make sure that you have the right types of flower beds closer to the house so that water is absorbed and doesn't sit. So all of these things, anything you can do to mitigate water, the risk of water is going to be worthwhile, because inspectors will catch those things, and those are the things that scare buyers.
Jay, real quick, because we only have a couple seconds left, and we're going to go a couple seconds over. Kevin is asking, are dimmers, we'll back up to lighting, are dimmers important nowadays?
It's one of those things that you will notice when you get in the house and you'll say, this is great. But when you're walking through, when you're doing your inspection for that first couple of weeks until you get to the closing, you will never know if they're there or not. So certainly if it's not expensive, you're replacing and I'm a big fan of always replace all the outlets, all the outlet covers, all the switches and switch plates, because it's not that expensive and it makes a big difference. So if you're doing it and it's not that much more money, feel free to do it. Make sure your light fixture will work on the dimmer. Make sure the bulbs you have will work on the dimmer. But I don't think you're going to get that money back, because, again, most people aren't even going to notice until 2 weeks after they've gotten to the house.
Right.
All right. Well, Mr. Jay Scott, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. Guys, Ruth, you as well. And if you like what you're seeing, guys, subscribe or follow wherever you're listening or watching. We really appreciate that. And we love to have your comments as well. As we publish this within the next day, all of Jay and Ruth's information will be in the show notes. And until next week, guys, thanks so much for watching.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.